Where do I start? Forgive me. I've been a working photojournalist for many years, 20 years, and being on stage is a little different for me. So let's just get into it. I've been documenting a lot of global health issues throughout the years. I've documented the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And these pictures are really the experiences I have shared. I don't look at them as me taking something. I don't view it like I'm taking or I'm shooting. There's this weird language in photography where you're taking or you're shooting. And I really view it as sharing. And in 1995, I was a staff photographer at the Denver Post. And I came across a World AIDS Day event. And there was a nun on these steps lighting candles on these bags. And there were maybe 200, 300 candles, and no one showed up. And it was the nun and I. So I made these nice pictures. And it was just kind of this awakening of a few things. Just how much awareness we needed to bring, how much stigma there was, and how even people that were HIV positive then were not coming forward to these events. So what I did was I set out to try to find different kinds of families. I set out to find not only gay men, but lesbian women who were infected through needles, through a man who was infected by sleeping with a prostitute, just a dynamic, put a different face to it. And really, ultimately, all these global health pictures is try to put their face to it. The work is not about me. The work is meant to bring awareness, give them a voice. And this work here was made in Malawi. So the first picture was a young girl dancing, HIV positive. All the kids were HIV positive. And this gentleman died of tuberculosis, infected with HIV. And so to me, documenting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Angola, Eritrea, Ethiopia, I'm not a war photographer. I don't consider myself a war photographer. But I saw these issues with AIDS and tuberculosis and malaria, unclean water, maternal and infant mortality issues. I saw them as an undeclared war. With all the things they try to do, all the ways you could try to prevent the issues from attacking their own family, they couldn't get out of it. And it's simply because from the moment they wake up to the moment they rest, they're facing these issues because they're surrounded by poverty. So this is a funeral in Zambia, another funeral in Zambia. And so all these pictures, they're not manipulated. They were used by the Boston Globe, the Denver Post. I've been doing books with a lot of NGOs like Harvard University, the World Health Organization. I've been working, trying to show this in a way that has ethics. So these pictures undoubtedly can be uncomfortable. Here in Zambia, the life expectancy went from 54 to 33 in 8 months. And so this young girl, who my colleague and I, John Donnelly, approached the family one day before. We knew about the funeral and asked permission from the family if we could photograph it. And on the same day, there was a wedding. So we wanted to intertwine their story. Here again, we're jumping now to Swaziland. Here's this woman, Jennifer, very nice girl, very well educated, and basically was forced to be a sex worker in Nigeria. There's another sex worker in Senegal. And so to me, I'm hoping to show them in some sort of dignity and light. I'm trying to show them in a way that doesn't take something from them. Here again in Senegal. And Senegal is one of those interesting countries where, unlike Nigeria, Senegal is in some cases one of the best kept secrets because they've been able to suppress the spread of HIV to 2% of the general population by educating some of the sex workers, by kind of empowering them to wear a condom, by offering them free health care. So now we're jumping to Malawi. And these pictures were kind of the, I guess you could say, the next link or the next gateway into my next body of work, which is on maternal infant mortality issues. But this time here, I was still very much focused on AIDS orphans, vulnerable children. And it was these women that I kind of felt that they were the gatekeepers. They were the ones that looked after everyone. And I saw that without their role, things were falling apart in the communities. And so this gentleman, his name's Daniel, he's kind of what I call kind of an unsung hero. He was one of the first people in his community in Kenya, where it's a very remote community. There was about 20,000 people that lived in this area, and he was one of the first people to be diagnosed with AIDS or HIV positive. He was incredibly sick. His family made him an outcast. His own brother would took his cup, gave him mental possessions, and he threw it in the latrine. He started his own, just within his own best friends in his community, he felt that, well, when he dies, what will happen to him? So he decided he would build his own coffin, dig his own grave. And time went on, and he got on ARVs. And he got healthier and healthier. And he decided he wanted to promote that being HIV positive could be a positive thing, that he could be a positive role model in his community. So what he started doing was he started painting on the rocks in his area, and you can see one in the background. And he painted things like a hippopotamus, and he described himself as a hippopotamus at one time in his life where he could only go out at night because they're so dangerous. And then he says, you see that? Right over there. And he pointed to a giraffe. And he said, you see that giraffe? He says, that's me now. I walk proudly with my head up. So he's joking. The van drove by and they honked the horn. The guy waved. He goes, yeah, see that guy? He's HIV positive too. And then he said, see him? And he's shaking his hand right there. He goes, he's HIV positive too. So he's eliminating stigma. So it was this full circle for me from back in 1995, where I'm on the steps where I couldn't find anyone to photograph for many months. And back in 1995, I became a certified AIDS counselor just to find families to photograph. And now here I was in a community where he had eliminated stigma. So the next work I want to show you is the work I did on maternal infant mortality issues. This work began in Sierra Leone. And this young woman had a very difficult delivery. She lived gave birth to a beautiful little boy. And it taught me to use my photography in a slightly different way, I guess you could say. I knew I wanted to be a responsible photojournalist, but I wanted to use my craft in a slightly different way. So in this stages, I started using a little bit of the creative process, I guess you could say, where I'm mimicking her energy, where she is in this space, and I'm using negative space to mimic that lonely space that she's in. And from that, it got worse. While I was photographing this woman, the surgeon comes up to me and puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Dominic, please come to the OR. We have one of the worst cases we've seen in years." It took the woman 3 days to get to the hospital, and she's barely alive. Please come to the OR. They're preparing her now. And her son died, and she lived. And so these numbers here with maternal and infant mortality are quite staggering. So in Sierra Leone, a woman faces a 1 in 8 chance of dying in her lifetime. When I started the project in 2010, almost 500,000 women were dying before, during, and after from childbirth complications around the world. These numbers have dropped. They're close to 270,000 around the world, but it's still 600 women every day dying. And so from witnessing such dramatic events, I guess you could say, it made me want to go other places. So I went to Senegal and documented the same issues. And I went to Namibia to try to show the flip side, where there were success stories. And I went to Nepal. And about a year later, I was asked to come back to Sierra Leone for the rollout of free health care for mothers and children under the age of 5. And this was being funded by an amazing organization called Ministerial Leadership Initiative, MLI. It's under the wing of the Aspen Institute. And from there, I met a wonderful man named Dr. Samuel Carbo. And he's given his life to creating change. And he told me a story about when he was a young doctor. He was in the remote places in Sierra Leone, where they carried a woman on a stretcher for 3 days. And when they reached the hospital, immediately they wanted to act, try to save the woman's life. They brought her into the OR, and he told me, before I could lay my hands on her, she died, and I will never forget her. And so these experiences, his experiences that he's sharing with me, have motivated me. They've motivated me to try to be a responsible photojournalist. And during this time that I was back in Sierra Leone, there were these long drives through heavy traffic in Freetown, Sierra Leone, where there was these congested streets and extreme neighborhoods of poverty. And I kept thinking to myself, well, what if the mom lives? What if the child lives? You know, and they go to a neighborhood like this. So when I went there on contract, I was planning to stay an additional 10 days on what I call vacation and stay on my own money and continue working on the maternal and infant mortality issues. But I decided at that moment that I needed to go into those neighborhoods because that was chapter 2 of these issues of the maternal infant mortality. And I went into this neighborhood called Kube, maybe a mile from the hospital that I was documenting those issues in. And it opened up, kind of a floodgate of what ifs and what's going on. At that time, I was completely ignorant to how big the water issues were around the world. And now today, around 700 million people don't have access to clean water. A kid that lives in an environment like this will carry up to 1,000 parasitic worms in their body in any given day. I've read today on the internet from the UNICEF that still up to 2,000 kids die every day from diarrhea. So I just want to close with that I hope you can see that all of these things are interlinked with each other. And even though AIDS has taught us a lot about how to build stronger health systems, there's still a lot to be done within fighting AIDS. There's a lot of people that don't have access to the drugs. The maternal infant mortality is obviously a huge issue, and I hope to continue making more work and bringing more awareness. Thank you for your time.